We live in an age where we are immersed in the world of machine learning algorithms, computer vision, and biometric sensors. But what does this all mean? Might these computational systems not replicate, somewhat disturbingly, our underlying biases and serve to reinforce the marginalization of those who have typically been excluded? Is AI necessarily complicit in replicating human prejudice? Or are there ways of deploying AI as a means of exposing human bias? I would suggest that there are potential strategies that could be deployed for AI to actually overcome bias. In this presentation, I'm going to address notions of the gaze, surveillance, and ways of seeing through the lens of my own creative practice. By implementing computer vision technologies, I hope to examine how different strategies of the gaze can be seen to undermine various forms of power structure and to promote forms of resistance. Here I'm trying to avoid any form of technological determinism. Rather than rehashing arguments as to whether surveillance is good or bad, I hope to take an intersectional feminist approach to show what constitute the gaze and surveillance, and to consider what the strategies of resistance might be proved to be effective in art and design practices. In my work, I have used various computer vision technologies to enhance human perception. For example, this is an emotive wearable which can recognize and respond to the facial expressions of people around with different type of behaviors. This type of smart, soft robotic garment could potentially benefit those with autism who have difficulties recognizing facial expressions. Another work, Reticence, is an emotive collar equipped with a facial tracking camera and an array of rotating quills, which respond to the movement of onlookers and their facial expressions. Similar to how a blind person could sense through haptic information, the movement of the wearable would allow the wearer to sense where people are standing and the emotions they're expressing, even with her eyes closed. Here I hope to address two questions related to the notion of the gaze. Firstly, what does it mean to be observed? Secondly, what do we see when we look out at the world? Through my argument, I use gaze as an interchangeable concept which could be shared between human and machine. This takes us to the historical concept of Panopticon. The Panopticon refers to a type of institutional building and a system of control envisioned by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham in 18th century. The layout of the Panopticon allows a guard to observe occupants without them knowing whether or not they're being watched. French philosopher Michel Foucault revitalizes interest in the Panopticon in his 1975 book Discipline and Punish, and uses it to illustrate such a model could be applied to disciplinary societies in order to control their citizens. He described the prisoner of a Panopticon as being at the receiving end of asymmetrical surveillance. As a consequence, the inmate polices himself for fear of punishment. What is fascinating about this example is that rather than external actions The gaze of the watcher is internalized to such an extent that each prisoner becomes his or her own watch person. Similarly, we could argue that this is what allows rules and regulation to be internalized so as to inform our actions, behaviors, and even our beliefs. Moreover, the manner in which we naturalize and internalize rules, it could be claimed, causes society to be less willing to contest unjust laws and accept a dominant outlook. Similar to how the inmates are not aware whether or not they're being watched, we are not aware that we have been controlled through naturalized dominant rules rooted in our own culture. This internalized asymmetrical power structure could be seen in the notion of male gaze. In her essay on visual pleasure and narrative cinema, Laura Mulvey exposes the asymmetry of social and political power relations between men and women. Mulvey claims that the male gaze serves to depict women as the object of pleasure for the heterosexual male viewer. Besides the fact that women are regularly subject to sexual harassment whenever they enter public space through various forms of looked-atness, women have absorbed all this unconsciously as a form of internalized male gaze. What if women were to subvert this through the power of their gaze? Could we draw upon computer vision technologies to allow women to know when onlookers are staring at them? Augmented with facial and gaze tracking technology and smart materials, this cape responds to the onlooker's gaze. The project engages with broader social issues such as the male gaze on the female body. The facial tracking algorithm in this piece detects age, gender, and gaze of the onlooker. While we know that gender is performative and it doesn't depend on pure representation, the movement of the garment based on the viewer's gaze could unfold a new sets of social meanings. If you are the wearer, you know which part of your body is being looked at, and if you are an onlooker, you know that your action is being noticed. The aim is to see how different strategies could be used to undermine the patriarchal system by developing form of resistance using surveillance technology. I wonder, what do we see as we gaze out to the world? As a thought experiment, French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan invites us to envision ourselves before a female mantis. The female mantis is known for devouring its partner after sex. In Lacan's experiments, we're wearing a mask, and we do not know whether the mask represents us as a female or male, and therefore we don't know whether or not we will be eaten by the female mantis. We simply do not know what we are to the other, and we often project our own very biases to the other in order to understand the other. In fact, we don't see anyone as they are, rather we see them as we are. And how we are is informed by the conformity to many of behavioral assumptions dictated by laws and customs. Although the colonial, racist, and sexist gaze might project oppression, backwardness, and terrorism onto the image of Muslim women wearing a burqa, I would like to stress the inherent difference between a mask and masquerade. While the mask hides, the masquerade reveals, but perhaps we could suggest that both are acting to some extent as a shield against the intrusive gaze. This project is inspired by the historical mask worn by Bandari women from southern Iran. It has been said that these masks were developed during Portuguese colonial rule as a way of protecting the wearer from the gaze of a slave master looking for pretty women. From these Iranian masks protecting women from the patriarchal oppression, to masks of Northwest Coast Indians, to masks worn as political statements, masks take on a range of different religious, social, and political roles, and offer an interesting insight into how we could use them to either conceal or reveal our identities. While these Iranian masks cover most of the wearer's face except the eye, I've been wondering how the eyes could be used as an expressive medium for communication. In my research, I came across an interesting incident in which an American officer uses blinking to send a secret message. In this video, you're seeing Admiral Jeremiah Denton blinking the word torture using Morse code during his captivity in Vietnam.
But so-called definite law. Do you think that's present about it?
Well, I don't know what is happening, but whatever the position of my government is, I support it fully. Whatever the position of my government is, I believe in it. Yes, sir. I am a member of that government.
The use of code for communication is nothing new, and in fact, women came up with a code word as a method for reporting domestic abuse during this lockdown. In this project, I was particularly inspired by a recent experiment involving 2 AI bots at the Facebook AI lab. The intention was to monitor how 2 bots might develop a dialogue. However, during this experiment, the bots seemingly started to formulate their own language, a language that no human could understand. The researchers had to intervene and tweak the algorithms to prevent this from happening. The story could also reveal how knowledge is power, and inability to understand unnerves those who wish to maintain their authority. For the source text of this project, I used the seminal article, Can the Subaltern Speak?, by the feminist theorist Gayatri Spivak. She asked whether it might be possible for the colonized, or the subaltern, to have a voice in the face of colonial oppression. Using machine learning algorithm, we can use Markov Chain to create a text. We represent each word as a state and view transitions as the likelihood that a specific word might go after another. We can consider these states at either a word or character level. And we can analyze what the probability might be of a given letter appearing after 3 letters. The engrams of a given text provides a strategy for generating the next text. The Markov chain could be therefore used to generate text where each new letters is dependent upon the previous letters. As the mask communicates using BLE protocol, the algorithm is repeated and the engrams changes. The smaller the engram gets, the less meaning there is in the generated text from the linguistic perspective. Each letter generated through this process is translated into Morse code, which informs the movement of the actuators. In the video documentation of this project, which will be shown shortly, you will see 2 women wearing masks, covered with eyelashes controlled by AI. They begin to communicate with each other, blinking their eyelashes in rapid succession. The aim is to develop a secret message for transmitting information between multiple women. The project brings together design, critical thinking, feminism, and AI. Winston Churchill once said, "We shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us." But doesn't this suggest a form of technological determinism? After all, there is no inherent application for any tool. A knife could be used as a murder weapon or just as a tool for cutting an apple. Similar arguments could be made about surveillance. The question we should ask are, in what context, how, and for whom are we using it? We should be aware of potential problems with AI. For once an issue is recognized as problem, it becomes a different kind of problem. It becomes a problem not by which we are trapped, but rather with which we can deal. Bias is certainly a problem which originates from human beings and is replicated and even exacerbated in AI. As we are training the artificial algorithms to learn to see the world, it is important to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be seen by the machine? And through the lens of what kind of data are they trained to look out to the world?